Everyone remembers the bear. Almost nobody remembers what happened next. A massive grizzly attacked one man deep in the American wilderness. Within seconds, his body was torn apart. His companions rushed in, firing their rifles until the bear finally disappeared into the forest. When they reached him, they couldn't believe he was still alive. His breathing was weak. He couldn't speak. His wounds looked impossible to survive. The expedition had only one choice. They stopped their journey and waited beside him. One day passed, then another. But he wasn't getting better. The group couldn't stay forever. 2 men volunteered to remain behind until he died, so they could give him a proper burial. It sounded honorable. It sounded like the right thing to do. But days later, those 2 men made a decision that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. They left. And they left him completely alone. The 2 men weren't supposed to leave. They had given their word. They would stay beside Hugh Glass until the very end. At least, that was the plan. But every passing hour made the wilderness more dangerous. Food was disappearing. The cold grew worse. Every strange sound in the forest reminded them that the grizzly might still be nearby. Fear slowly replaced loyalty. Then they made a decision they would regret forever. They picked up Hugh's rifle, his knife, his supplies. Without them, he had absolutely no chance. They looked at him one last time. His eyes were closed. His breathing was barely noticeable. To them, he was already gone. So they turned around and disappeared into the endless wilderness. They believed nobody would ever discover what they had done. They believed Hugh Glass would never move again. But they were wrong, because the moment the forest became silent, Hugh slowly opened his eyes, and what he saw changed everything. Darkness, silence. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, one finger moved. Hugh Glass opened his eyes. At first, he couldn't remember where he was. The forest was completely quiet. The men were gone. The camp was almost empty. His rifle, gone. His knife, gone. His supplies, gone. For a moment, he simply stared at the sky. Then the truth slowly returned. The bear, the pain, the promise his companions had made, and the fact that nobody had kept it. He tried to call for help. Nothing. Only silence answered. He tried to sit up. His body refused. Every movement felt impossible. Every breath reminded him that he was completely alone. Most people would have accepted their fate. Anyone else would have given up. But Hugh Glass made a different decision. If nobody was coming, he would somehow find a way to survive. Hugh Glass knew one thing. If he stayed where he was, he would never leave that forest alive. But there was one problem. He couldn't even stand. Every attempt ended the same way. He collapsed back onto the ground. The journey ahead wasn't measured in meters. It was measured in hundreds of miles, and every inch seemed impossible. Then he stopped trying to walk. Instead, he reached forward with one arm, pulled himself a little farther, then again, and again. It wasn't walking. It wasn't even crawling. It was pure determination. The forest didn't care. The cold didn't care. No one was coming to save him. Every minute felt longer than the last. Every small movement drained what little strength he had left. Still, he refused to stop. Because as long as he could move, even 1 inch, there was still hope. And somewhere beyond those endless trees, his real journey was only beginning. Every inch forward came with a price. The forest never became easier. It became even more dangerous. The days felt endless. The nights became colder. Hugh Glass had no food, no weapon, no map, and no idea how far civilization really was. But the greatest enemy that wasn't the wilderness, it was exhaustion. His strength was disappearing. His hands felt heavier with every movement. Even pulling himself forward became a struggle. Then another question appeared. How long could a man survive without food? Hours passed. Nothing changed. No animals, no people. Only silence. Then, he heard something. A distant sound. Flowing water. For the first time in days, hope replaced fear. If there was water, there might also be life. Slowly, he dragged himself toward the sound. Every movement hurt. Every breath demanded effort. But stopping meant surrender. So he kept moving. He survived one more day. Yet the wilderness had already prepared its next challenge. And this one would be even harder. The river gave Hugh Glass something he hadn't felt in days. Hope. Not because he was safe, because he finally had a direction. If the water kept flowing, perhaps it would lead somewhere. So he followed it. Slowly, one painful movement at a time, the current became his only guide. Days passed. The forest never stopped testing him. Cold mornings, endless rain, sleepless nights. There were moments when he almost stopped moving, not because he wanted to quit, but because his body simply had nothing left. Still, every sunrise meant one more chance. Every new bend in the river raised the same question. Was someone finally there? Or was it only another empty stretch of wilderness? Then, he noticed something different. Not a sound, not an animal. A sign. Something that didn't belong in the wild. For the first time since being abandoned, he wasn't completely alone. But the next person he met might become his greatest hope, or his greatest danger. For the first time in weeks, Hugh Glass wasn't following hope anymore. He was following proof. The abandoned canoe, the old campfire. Someone had been here, somewhere nearby. People were alive. His heart began to race. Was this finally the end of his nightmare? Or the beginning of another one? Every sound made him stop. Every shadow between the trees looked like a person. Then, he saw movement. Not an animal. A human figure. After weeks of complete isolation, another person stood only a short distance away. Hugh tried to call out. His voice was barely louder than a whisper. The figure stopped, looked in his direction. For one long moment, neither of them moved. Would this stranger offer help? Or simply walk away, just like the others had? The answer would decide whether Hugh Glass lived or disappeared into the wilderness forever. Hugh Glass had done the impossible. The wilderness had failed to stop him. The bear hadn't. Hunger hadn't. The freezing nights hadn't. And neither had the men who abandoned him. After weeks of fighting for every single step, he finally reached safety. Most people expected one thing: revenge. After everything he had suffered, who wouldn't? But when Hugh Glass finally stood face to face with the men who had left him behind, his decision shocked everyone. He chose not to take their lives. Instead, he walked away. His story spread across the American frontier. People refused to believe it was true. How could one man survive so much? Yet the records remained. More than 200 years later, Hugh Glass is still remembered. Not because he defeated a bear, but because he refused to surrender, when every reason to give up was already in front of him. Sometimes, the strongest weapon a person has is the decision to keep moving.